Hello and welcome everyone to our
fifth
vlog.
Yeah, fifth vlog. Nailed it. So what we're going to do, so you might be able to see here, we're staying with two of the lovely people who are on the project with us, with Tiago, who was our translator, and with Erica, who was the doctor. So it's a few days after the project now. We've been collating a lot of our thoughts. We're here still in Altamira, and have been linking up with some of the groups that we're spending time with, and kind of digesting a lot of it. So these, we're going to make a couple vlogs now that are like back to back, 5 and 6, and they're going to cover.
Basically, they're gonna cover what happened during our time in the rainforest, during the 2-day meeting in the Manileto's community and everything that was discussed then, and then the 2-day meeting in Altamira.
Yeah, so I think we'll cut it between those two. So this one's going to be about travelling up the Rio Iriri to the Manileto community and everything that we did there. Ali's been writing the script, so...
Well, not really, just making bullet points of everything that happened, because a lot of things happened.
Shall I start, and then you can jump in? So basically, so we left off in the Rio Novo community. So the last video, if you've watched it, ended up being super dark. So we just did some stuff that evening. Actually, what we did that evening was we did loads more singing, and I got called out for singing... We Will Rock You by Queen. If I've got a video of it, I'll put it up, but I probably don't. It was terrible. And then the next morning we got up at like 4:30 or something and jumped in the boats and headed straight up the Rio Iriri, which is an unbelievably gorgeous river. Like, super beautiful. So
it was like a 10-hour boat
There's massive
journey.
rocks everywhere throughout it, and it's super wiggly, and you need to... Like all of the captains we had for the boats, they were all like local guys from the river, because you just need that, because it's a super hard to navigate river, and so
there was some rapids,
it was beautiful going up.
There was like really shallow water. Luckily we didn't get stuck.
No, and we stopped a number of times through the day, but one of the things for me that it shows is just like how, again, like we're going to talk about like how big the areas are here. So it was 10 hours of going upstream. And it's hard to see the map behind us, but we might show you something. But all that we did was go along like a stretch of the Rio Iriri, which then takes this big bend and goes again for like 1,000 kilometers in another direction. And all of that is within the city-state of Altamira. So it's just huge distances. And we were there all day under the baking sun. One half of me got very sunburned. But then we arrived in Manileto. I'll put up loads of pictures and videos of us traveling, because it was really beautiful.
It was,
and it was a time to just talk and mix with some of the other people on the teams. We got to know a lot of people a bit better. I kind of framed the conversations that we'll be having for the next few days once we're in Manileto. Especially we talked with a young guy, Denilson.
Oh, that's where we met, because a lot of the people joined halfway through the trip. So Denilson, who is a young activist and social leader from a Ribereños community, joined us that day on the boat to go to the Manileto community. That day later in the evening, the Climate Youth Strikers from Belgium arrived finally, and so did
Nadia from Pussy Riot, which was cool.
Yeah, it was like finally everybody arrived.
And the community was quite small, but it was really beautiful. It was tucked in just across like the river bend.
Well, we can just get straight to the...
Ali just wants to talk about the meeting.
Yeah, otherwise it's going to be super long.
Okay, we'll have a short video. We're going to talk about the meeting. Go on, hit it. What did we talk about?
Well, basically, once we arrived, we had this 2-day gathering. Finally, everybody had arrived, and it was the real time for everyone to, first of all, introduce in like greater depth like their story, their fight. Everything, they'd been the movements that they are part of, and share a bit of themselves with everyone. So that's like more or less what happened over the 2 days. And at the end of the second day, we kind of we started thinking about, okay, we've had these discussions for this whole 2 days, what do we do next? But first let's talk about what we talked about. So the first day it was initiated by a very beautiful ceremony from Miguel and like David's the page and Miguel's another shaman as well, and I can't remember the name of the thing he took.
Yeah, it was one of the kind of narcotics that they use here for when they're doing shamans, and they use a blowpipe, and they like blow it into the nose of the other person. It's like a ceremonial like giving of the kind of the vision, which is what they use a lot of the substances from the forest
like
for.
to purify the body as well. But it was a great way to start the event. Then we went on with introductions from several of the activists. So would you like to talk? It was Raimunda and Socorro and Anita who talked about.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably best for you to talk about that. A lot of it, like especially between those three, was about kind of that view of being, especially like a woman in these situations, or being a young person, and they talked about historical times, especially with the hydroelectric projects. So the Raimunda, for example, has been moved twice because of 2 hydroelectric projects that have decimated her and her local community. So one that was further west of here, and then the Belomonte one as well, and then Socorro was talking about the minings as well.
Yeah, so I think out of Raimunda's testimony, she has fought really hard to get land, because her land was in the area that was later, evicted. Because that's where the reservoir for Belomonte was going to be built, and she had to fight really hard just to get a piece of land for her to live in, and to the point they were so desperate that her husband asked them to commit suicide.
Yeah, this was afterwards. So the reservoir where Belomonte was built, and whenever you build a big hydroelectric project like this, what happens is you create a big dam behind, and then with the dam you then decide when you let water through. So there's 2 big problems. One is that downstream the water is massively cut off, and that's what we learn about from like Anita and where her community was, who downstream of the dam, like the water flow has been reduced by like 80%. And they're one of the types of fish that's really prevalent there, that is like a big part of what the communities catch. That fish lives off eating fruit that falls from the trees along the banks into the river, but that doesn't happen when the river is so much lower, because the fruit falls and hits the ground instead. And so like the number of fish is just utterly decimated. Local communities are like, starving effectively.
Yeah, and like they cannot even, swim in the river anymore. Like if they do, well, they have to, but like itchy skin, itchy eyes, irritation.
Yeah, and
allergies.
it becomes incredibly hot because of the smaller it is, the more the water's going to come in. No, the sun is going to heat the water up, the lower it is. And the other side with the reservoir is that you flood a huge area of land. And actually it's a really important thing for people to look up, because this is one of the reasons why hydroelectric projects are just not very good, often carbon-wise. So you look at like Three Gorges Dam in China, like we studied that when I was at uni. It's the biggest hydroelectric project in the world, but because it flooded such a massive area, what happens is all of the vegetation that's there, the plants and everything, they kind of mulch down under the water, and then they create this kind of very like thick layer of sediment and peat and stuff, and then it just the amount of methane that comes out of it is amazing. So actually, like until a dam is like 20 years old, it would have been using. Sometimes they can be like equivalent to if you'd burnt gas to generate that much electricity in terms of generating carbon.
That's great.
But equally, it's like that area that you flood displaces like thousands of people.
Yeah.
Like this one, especially where they flooded it, we've seen pictures and they're just like horrible, because the area where they flooded, like there's just dead trees on these little islands everywhere, and you can know that was like when you spend time with these people and you see how they're like connected with the trees and the forest, and then to be in a place which used to be your home but is now just like a dead wasteland, where the river was never meant to be. It's like there's this natural harmony between the river and the forest, and then they've dug a canal and forced
the water in there.
Yeah, like a whole bit of river there, and it's just really brutal. And so that's where Raimunda's community were from, and now
they were displaced.
They just can't live there
by the dam and had to move somewhere else. and it's a completely different life, because she said they always lived from the river, they were fisher people, and now, you know, at her old age she's having to learn how to do agricultural practices, which she had never done, and it's learning a whole new thing, her and her husband alone, which, you know, they're two elderly people and they don't know what to do. They said they feel like they're taking away land from, you know, the monkeys and the animals that are supposed to be there, but she has nowhere else to go. And she's fighting to get more land, because what a lot of these companies don't understand is how they live as a community. And Raimunda was saying, like, there's no point in me having one little plot of land for myself, because we are an elderly couple, so we need to have a community around us to look after us, to farm the land and to live together, and this is how they live. So a solution is not just giving a little bit of land for each specific family, like somewhere random.
Yeah.
It's
so what you can see there is like, you know, we started talking about those three stories, and then we just talk about Raimunda's, and we just go into it, and there's so many variants and difficulties and hard bits, and one of these big things is just that it's hugely complicated.
Yes.
And the way these guys live with nature and with the forest is
and
so...
with each other as well.
Yeah, and with each other is so
dynamic.
nuanced and complicated and like, and delicate as well. And then when you just come in and you just go like, here's a massive hydroelectric dam, it just fucks everything up. It's just really, really crap. And it shows that like use of power, and actually, you know, the whole Belamonte scheme has been rife with corruption throughout. Like the government's been heavily involved and all of those things.
And they didn't fulfill any of the promises. Like they promised that they would, you know, give land to the people they had evicted. They would give social services, sanitation, blah blah. But it's all been words.
And I think it's just a really big. Just before we move on, like it's a really big thing we need to see within the green movement in Europe and the West is that the way in which renewable energy, and we talked about in the previous video, like how it's going to be used as a form of oppression, a form of colonization into places like this, where we go in and we demand natural resources much as we used to demand natural resources and the human life, you know, of these people who the West would tell you are savages and, you know, not developed. Like it will just get cast aside, and it's just broken. It's a really awful way. And the same thing happens with the mining companies here. So Soroko was telling us about Socorro, was telling us about where she lives and the kind of the heavy metals that are in the water that have given her cancer and lots of other people in her village cancer, but even just about the way in which those mining projects came about in the first place, and how you would have these kind of the blancos, the white men, would move in and come into the communities. And
they'd sell this idea of development,
of progress, of money, and...
Yeah.
And then you'd have these, so she was a young person, and young people in some of these communities like just don't have a voice, you know, especially when the elders are talking. There's a huge amount of respect, and often that works well, but when you bring in this, you know, big outside influence that no one really understands, then you can have these really like broken dynamics. And one of the things that happened with Socorro is that she ended up in this kind of like, you know, conditional kind of sexual relationship with one of the business people who was coming in to open the mine, and actually quite a few of the young women did in that area, and it was just like hearing her talk about it and like the pain and the hurt and how it destroyed like her community and made her, you know, soured so much of her own life and things.
And then they force abortions and all the women that they'd constantly abuse of. Yeah. And she had gone through one of these forced abortions herself, and it's just like, what happens? They come, they sell you something, and it's a lot. And she said she did not blame her parents, she did not blame her elders, because they did not know what this development was about, and they just thought it would really help, but at what price, and who does it really help?
Yeah, the hidden price of development that's never there, and it's definitely not going to help these communities. It's never intended to do that. So that, like, having those conversations and having Anita, the young woman from down below Belamonte, talk, and she only talked for a few minutes, but it was so powerful and emotional. Like, really set this scene to like help us, especially those of us from outside of the Amazon, to come and really understand, you know, where the pain is coming from and where the hurt is and how strong it is. And then like, and that's only just like the in your face physical stuff. That's not even including like climate change and how the environment is changing and how these guys are losing their way of life and how the forest is reacting to this and the fires that are happening and all those kind of things. So that's what we moved into talking about afterwards, isn't it? Like
so I think the first day was kind of that more emotional, anecdotal, what you've lived through, like real life experiences of what it is to be at the front line of ecological destruction and destruction of everything of, and how societies and cultures collapse as a result of that and lives are ruined, but also very importantly as well how they fight.
So strong,
so strong, and they're like, fuck it, like
totally. And that's one of the things you don't see. Like, it's very easy from outside when you see these things, the way the charity industrial complex, as we like to call it, works, or NGOs, is they show you the suffering and they try and get you to play off that. Like, we call it, like, it's like poverty porn, isn't it? That idea of like showing you this one-dimensional view of someone who's suffering, but then when you're here you see the suffering and the hurt, but then what they throw at you is like the fire.
And this like joy, someone was saying, like we still have joy,
so much.
And that is in itself such a big act of resistance when everything around you, it's kind of like they don't want you to be happy, but despite everything they have this joy and fire in their lives, even more than what you see in the movement up in Europe.
Yeah, completely. No, it's just an utterly different thing, like that kind of deep cultural resistance, and how it builds this spirit is unbelievable. I mean, actually, and we talked on the first day, we talked a little bit about Extinction Rebellion, about what we're doing, and especially about XI Youth and the Solidarity Network, and this need to really kind of make practical the climate justice conversation, and how we link our work in Europe in a way, that we support the work here and we don't silence it or transplant it that can so easily happen. And it was really great, and I think lots of people enjoyed it. And Tiana was there as well, talking from XR, and she talks a lot about her kind of learnings, like in terms of being with indigenous groups and the origins of XR, and
which was a really long, very interesting story from how we got about this, like in this mess we are, and how from that XR was born, and what they've done. And then you talked about how bad the climate
I think that's one of the things, and actually it's a lot of what people talked about on the second day when the scientists came, like Antonio and others. Like, it's just like one of the things people don't know here is how bad stuff is, like in XR, like. And I know XR's rhetoric has become slightly more hopeful and less extreme in the last few months, but like its first slogan was like, we're fucked, because in so many ways, like, our current lifestyle is going to break. It can't survive what's going to happen to the climate. And when you're with these guys here and they already talk about how much has changed, and then that, like people have seen the heading for Extinction Talk, it's like, even if we stopped right now, like the amount of warming that's baked in, the changes that will happen over the next 30 years are going to completely change the way of life here. They're going to completely change the way of life all over the world. And people just don't have access to that information. And it means that when they're doing, and actually also the young people, like, they don't even know that these things happen in other parts of the world.
It was very interesting, because when we were sharing the anecdotes and the story from the Pulbari Solidarity group, and from Rumana, which is a group that we've worked really closely with in the International Solidarity Network, and how these 3 young activists were shot dead during a big protest against a huge proposed open cast coal mining project in Bangladesh. And I remember talking to, like, we were just chatting a few of the
on the boat,
young
on the
people
way back.
on the boat, and he was like, I did not know these things happened
in other places.
And it's this idea that it's, not just like, this is a whole widespread systematic oppression and destruction. that is
across the world.
Across the world.
But when you do tell people that, and when you say how big the issue is, how prevalent it is, how quick we need to act, and then you talk to people here about how many other people around the world are suffering in very similar ways, especially indigenous communities, like you see them just putting together those dots so quickly and just wanting to connect and wanting to act. And a lot of what we talked about, and then the girls from Fridays for Future and Eli representing UKSCN, like what they talked about was this, like what's happening with this nascent, you know, environmental movement in the youth, in the you know, in the UK, in Europe, in the West especially, in terms of like the people getting ready to act and learn. And I think one of the big things we need to learn as our youth is that we just need access to more information, to more stories like this, so that we can base our activism in what's happening over here. Because the political education we're getting from our system, from the UK, from our news, is just awful. Like, they're not telling us the full story, they're not telling us what things are. And actually, so one of the big things about setting up the connections to talk to the young people here, and how different types of activism are. So Niara, who's from Nayara from Fridays for Future Brazil, stood up after the girls from Fridays for Future in Europe and talked about the differences here in Brazil.
Yeah, it was a very emotional talk. Like, she cried whilst she was talking about it. But you know, when you ask like a lot of people here in the cities whether climate change is one of their priorities, it's actually almost right at the bottom, because, you know, first of all, they don't have like where to eat, anything to eat, so that is their main priority. And how are you going to strike from school when some of them are struggling even to be able to go to school? So it's how these forms of activism are completely different in different places. And she was saying, you know, like kids getting shot and dying, and when this is happening, it's very difficult to, like, when you're suffering right now in your own skin, like some of the most horrendous effects of the system.
Yeah, the violence.
You are not thinking about, you know, 5 years down the line, climate change will destroy everything.
Yeah.
Because already your life is pretty destroyed.
Yeah, or if you are thinking about it, then it's like the rhetoric we have about climate change is so kind of, you know, this is the most important issue, all other issues are not important, we have to focus on this. And so the young people who are then get caught between this rhetoric of, no, you have to think about 5, 10, 15 years time, but right now you also have all of these big social problems. And I think one of the key things that sums it all up is that, like, you know, Extinction Rebellion, when it was launched, decided not to talk about social justice issues as part of its strategy. And actually, you know, it's probably worked really well in the UK in terms of not asking people to talk about colonialism and white supremacy and all of these different forms that actually are what the climate crisis is and like what is causing it.
Which is interesting.
But what they said here in Brazil was that...
Well, I was just going to say that, like, telling this to like Raquel and Gabi and Nayara, who
part of
movements, in Mundo, and Nayara, who's part of movements, environmental movements here in Brazil. They're like, it's impossible to even think about starting a movement without talking about these things, without talking about social injustice. There's no way that you cannot not mention that, because it, like, you will not get anywhere. It is a country where that is like so in your face every single time that you just cannot ignore it. So it's very interesting how in the UK that strategy works, because it's worked for XR. Like, and that's what it's, you know,
and in ways for Fridays for Future as well. Like, there isn't a big political conversation happening in the way that they need to happen here, because if they don't happen here, then, you know, people die when you're doing actions. And so this, hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of all the things we discussed, and it was obviously very wide-ranging, and there were lots of people from different places, like Nadia from Pussy Riot told us her experience of...
So that was on the second day.
Yeah, being in, like wrongfully accused of, like, you know, political dissent and getting sent to prison.
She got taken to prison for writing a song about feminism.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Well, an anti-Vladimir Putin song.
And
Yeah, and then talked about...
2 years in prison for a song is...
About her work in prison and like how getting the word out and using your status and how to still be an activist in that situation. And it was really cool, and there were lots of different parts.
It was amazing.
And then what came out of it near the end was, like Ali was saying, like we synthesized everything down and we came up with these kind of lots and lots of ideas of what we were going to do. And then we left Manileto's and we traveled back, and we had another night at the Rio Novo community, and we headed back down the river again. And obviously we knew everyone wastes better by then, so it was great, and we had lots of time to talk to people in the boats and everything. And we got to Rio Novo, and then we did a little workshop where we brought all of those ideas up, and we saw which ones we might want to do and synthesized it down.
Should we talk more about the second day? Or not?
I thought we just...
Well, no, but is like the science on the flying rivers and the black sands, about the 50% of the Amazon being planted. I think that's pretty mental.
Yeah, I was just looking at the time.
Yeah, but I think that's basically what the second day was about, this science and this anthropologist talk. The most abundant tree species in the Amazon is the acai tree. And it's no coincidence, really. It was planted, it was nurtured by the indigenous communities that lived here. And then, like, 10 subspecies of acai are amongst the, 50% most common species that are found in the Amazon. So it really challenges this idea, like, it adds more. So indigenous people are not just simply protecting the forest because that is their home, but they're actually making the forest. They make it thrive. They've made the Amazon what it is. It's through this, interconnected relationship, and it's far more entwined, the human nature, because we are one, relationship that I could have ever imagined. Like, when they said 50% planted, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, how is it possible to do that? But it's true, it makes sense when the most common tree is acai.
Yeah, and if you want to know more about it, type it. There's a little phrase. It's like 227 hyper-dominant species, and it's the idea that so like 50% of the Amazon was planted through the indigenous. And the indigenous communities have been here for like 14 or like 11,000 years.
Yeah.
And how the Amazon has grown with them. And I think it's that, just thinking about it in terms of like all animals have a space within their natural environment that they hold, and lots of them support the growth of the natural environment, or some of them live off it, or however. And the humans who have been here have been so utterly embedded in the growth of the Amazon that they've supported that growth. And it wouldn't be the Amazon if it hadn't been for the indigenous communities.
I think there was this just like very, in the however many thousands of years that humans were here before the European colonizers arrived, like 0.05% of the Amazon had been cut down, and in the last 50 years
20%.
It's 20%. So that shows you, that's very indicative that humans are not the problem.
Yeah,
it is our mentality. And next time, like whenever I see that stupid like image comparison thing shared on Instagram where it's like nature without humans looking amazing, and then you've got this forest and they put a bunch of humans in it and everything looks destroyed, it's wrong. Like,
yeah, put some white humans in there.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, and that's one of the things, like, these guys are super clear on that. Like, they know it's not them that's destroying the forest. They know it's never been part of their identity and their mindset.
I mean, and they're also human. They've made mistakes at some points. They mentioned it, and they've learned from it, and they know what works best, what doesn't. And
yeah, and things change.
Yeah,
but it's just about that, like, whether you are part of nature or whether you are there to destroy and make profit off nature. And it's just very counterposed things, and it's where the conflict comes from. And actually in the second part of this, when we talk about what happens in Altamira, the event, then you'll see directly like when this friction comes to fruition through
But we'll
conflict.
talk about that next.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically that's what a lot of what happened on the second day, and talking more about the flying rivers, which I think you talked about
well,
before.
it's just talking like this, using the science to quantify what the indigenous people already know, which is the importance of the Amazon, not just here in South America, but to the world's climate systems.
World.
And it is, it's utterly pivotal. It's like if we lose the Amazon and go carbon neutral, the world will still be destroyed.
That's why
like civilization will end.
Amazon center of the world. If we lose the Amazon, we lose this fight.
We're fucked. It's like
really fucked.
and so like understanding how pivotal it is in this fight. So that was what we did when we went back to the Rio Novo community. We synthesized what we were doing and created this kind of alliance for Amazonia Centro del Mundo and how it would look. And there were kind of a few key things that came out of that. So there was a creation of an alliance for like people of the forest alliance, but protectors of the forest that everyone could be part of. So there'll be information coming out about that. There was this stuff about Belo Sun, which is a massive gold mining project that the Canadian group is trying to build near Belo Monte, and potential ideas of doing like, big protests against that, a big movement building against that. And then understanding of how we can support the communities who are using the Amazon in a way that is sustainable, and like the Rio Novo community and the products that they're creating, and how we can spread the awareness of that. So it's kind of some key things that came out of it, and then we took that energy into the event in Altamira, which we traveled back to over the next day. So we'll end this video here. There's a lot more that could have been said, obviously, like
we'll feed it up more in the blog.
We'll
put links to all of this information. There's more like videos from all of the people that we talked about, in which they talk about their experiences, videos about Belo Monte and the effects, and we'll just share it all there for you to see. Like, it's really, really important.
Diving into that understanding of what things can do, and the kind of the human side of all these big changes that we we need.
That's what one of the things that mentioned on the last day of this second day kind of trip is like, you can talk a lot about the science and how this model shows this and how this and that, but what I feel is like, you don't need to be a scientist, you don't need to have a PhD or be an expert at anything to know that the world is fucked, pretty much. You just like need to look at the people, just hear like the stories of Raimunda, Socorro, Anita, and there's like stuff that is really, really fucking wrong with the world right now. And like, no matter how much we perfect this climate model, this climate science or whatever, there is already enough suffering right now, and enough people who have lived in first person what this is about to need to do something. And no matter, we've had this science data for decades and nothing has happened. There needs to be a change in our culture, in our humanity, and that's what needs to change. That's what should be our priority, not getting out more. I mean, both things, but
you are a scientist. But I think just we'll finish here. But it's that emotional connection, and XR talks about it from the very beginning. It's like science isn't going to change the world.
And that's what I love.
Science is a way of describing things, and it's the emotional connection. And one of the things people can take away from the understanding of decolonization is that, we've been taught. And especially people like myself, like I'm a white guy, I've been taught that the people here are like less than human because of the way they live, because of where they are in the world, because of their skin color. And actually when you come here, or even you meet like the diaspora groups in the UK, like, the UK is hugely diverse and we're like massively pulled apart by these things. And actually decolonization just means rehumanization. It means meeting people as humans, hearing their struggles, connecting with them in who they are, and not judging them, not putting these predispositions that we've been taught, on top of it. And actually for me at least, a lot of that has come through in this, and especially meeting the young people here and being like, these young people are just the same as young people everywhere else, and they've gone through something so different. And so if you want to practically work on decolonization, work on being more human yourself with other people and treating everyone as if they are human. And that goes a long way to where we need to go. So we'll finish here for this one.
Thank you for watching again.
And we'll jump straight in. Maybe we'll change some clothes before the next one so it looks like we did it at a different time. We'll just record it straight away. Yes, there'll be another one coming out after this. And thanks if you got all the way to the end. And if not, then why the hell not? No, cool. We'll leave it there. Bye.